folks to jump on. So cool. Let's see who's up this early in the morning. All right, wait for a few folks to jump on. And it's going to be an interesting session. So I'm going to do something new, something different. I'm going to do just a brainstorming session because people always ask me, how do I come up with my content? And so, hello Mona, hello Mohammed. So what I'm going to do is, something's been like bothering me, so I've been trying to figure this thing out. And so I thought I'd brainstorm like live, right? So I'm just going to brainstorm live with you guys. And the question I have is, when you look at the future of selling, it's like, what does this look like? You know, you hear words like sales enablement platforms. You hear phrases like sales engagement platforms, you know, CRMs, you know, what does that look like? You know, all these different things, and you wonder, where is this all going? What is the future of selling and maybe even marketing look like, right? Got a bunch of highs, man, so thank you guys. So what I want to do is, for me, it's been like bothering me, right? For the last few days, I'm like, what does this all look like? What does it all mean? We talk about artificial intelligence, right? We talk about voice recognition systems. We talk about image recognition systems. We talk about CRMs, again, the different platforms. And you're like, where does this all fit? And how does this all look? And so what I'm going to do is just like a brainstorming exercise to kind of give you an idea of how I try to figure things out. And as I was writing I was just writing stuff, and I just kept writing. And I said, maybe it'd be cool if I just jump into this, right? If I just jump into this brainstorming session, and then maybe we can brainstorm together. I've never tried this, so this is kind of a new experiment, a little social experiment for me. And so again, I'm just trying to figure out, what does this AI thing look like? What's it going? And sometimes you got to look back in order to look forward. And so what I want to do is take a step back and then look forward. And so I'm going to bring it up full screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this full screen. This is where I'm going to do all the brainstorming. You get to kind of see how my brain works. And then, well, you'll see how it works. Hold on a second. And so that's me right there. And so, like I said, I'm going to spend most of my time just writing on here and just, you know, again, get a cup of coffee, chill. Might be, I don't know how long this session is going to go, so I'm just going to go for it. So I started thinking about CRMs, right? But before I get into what a CRM is, which is just a system of record, right? I started thinking about, have you ever heard of some of you are familiar with ERP systems, right? An ERP system is it's like an enterprise resource planning tool. It's like the central brain that runs a company / operation. And typically in an ERP, and I'm just giving you the foundational building blocks of what's connected to the system, right? And for example, you can have, I'll just say, manufacturing, right? So everything that has to do with manufacturing plus operations in terms of running a facility would be in that database, right? So that would be a database. So think of these as giant databases, right? So that would be a lot of content, right? So what's in manufacturing, what's in production, what's in operations, that would be there. Then over here, you might have, let's say, an HR database. Everything that has to do with HR is managed through here. And again, everything's being managed by the central brain right here, the ERP system, right? So that's HR. You also might have finance involved in here. Finance, by the way, is, you know, again, anything that has to do with money, approving credit for a company who wants to buy a product. So let's say, I don't know, we're manufacturing this little remote control here. The question then becomes is, you know, how do we manufacture that? Well, manufacturing, production, right? HR, how do we get the right people in the right places, in the right positions, and make sure all the policies are taken care of, they're being paid correctly, and all the rules for employment are being enforced through this HR. So that's kept in the database. And on the finance piece is basically, you know, if you're looking for financing, you need to be approved for financing, things of that nature, net 30, net 60, whatever it may be. This is where it comes in. You could also argue that here, somewhere, you have legal, right? And here's where we do contracts, and these two could be tied together, right? Legal and financing. So these could be contract. And again, all managed from the ERP, right? This is how we do it. This is how it's managed. You also have, let me see, we got finance, AR, legal, what am I missing? There could be something else, because you can split this off almost any way you want. You can kind of divide it up, right? But then I started thinking about where does sales fit in? And if you look at the typical system today, what they're doing is and I'm gonna use a different color for this one now. And I think what they're doing is right here is where you begin to see the CRM, right? The CRM, where you manage all your customers. So that's kind of the model I started with. I said, okay, that's a cool model. That's kind of how I see the world, the whole landscape. Now, I like to do, have you guys ever done this, like bubble mapping? Bubble mapping is just, you're drawing bubbles to really understand the landscape, how things work. So this is how my brain works. I got to like bubble map something out just to see if it makes any sense, right? And so, anyway, that was my starting point. Let me see if I can understand how an ERP system works and how it manages a business with a CRM. But now there's the CRM. And your traditional CRM was just, that's where you have your customer history, your interactions with your customers, your basic system of records, right? That's kind of where it's at. But what's happening is that this is now, by the way, exploding. By the way, AI, artificial intelligence, is being applied to a lot of this, right? I think the most exciting part, for example, of AI is right here on legal. You now have like robots that can actually read a contract, and tell you where the gotchas are. So AI could be applied to all of these, right? In manufacturing, again, whether it's image control, visual controls, or recognition systems, again, all AI, but that's not what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about the blue stuff. I want to talk about red stuff, but understanding the blue helps me say, well, how does this work now? How is this going to work in the future? And so if I can squeeze this down, let me see if I can squeeze this down, move that over to the corner right there. Just keep it right there for now. And so what I want to do is I want to expand on that. So what's a CRM? And how is this thing working? So let's take a step back, right? Let me go with a thinner marker here. So here's where I was kind of having a dilemma. I said, okay, so we got the CRM system, right? And we're putting all this data in it, right? And we're pulling data, by the way. You're going to be pulling data from manufacturing, from HR, from finance, legal when you do contract. This is being sucked into a CRM as well. Again, it has access. But now, I think what you're going to see is this becomes its own spur. This becomes its own center. So said another way, what if we put the CRM right in the middle now? Again, it's still tied to the ERP right here. It's still tied to that. But now I'm taking this right here, and I'm moving it over here. That's kind of what I'm doing, okay? So everything is still connected to the ERP. So I'm like, all right, so that's cool. So we kind of understand this, right? So I'm kind of going, all right, that's cool. We understand the CRM. So now I'm thinking, well, how does this all fit together? So let's look at AI and what's happening with AI and how they're bringing stuff in, right? What's all this new stuff that's making the system more intelligent, right? And so now with AI, what are we capturing? We're capturing, I started thinking about, okay, we're capturing text, right? We're capturing text. So, for example, if you're on the phone, they're capturing your text. If you're writing emails, you can almost say that's text, but we'll call it email, right? So they're also looking at your email. So every interaction you have with your customer is now being tracked, right? So every text message, every email, and then I think, what else did I have written down here? So they got text, email, and by the way, social media is another form of text, right? I'm grouping these as text, social media, rather. So this right here, we know is text, right? This is all text stuff right there. So they're capturing that stuff. And the systems are pulling this in, man. The systems are pulling this in. They're scraping the internet and pulling this stuff in. So that's the text piece. But also now, what you have over here, let's just do it in a different color just to make it fun, is you're now capturing video, right? And what are they doing with video? So for example, this conversation, they're capturing the video so they can kind of read my facial expressions, but they're also translating into text, right? Right? And the interesting thing is, let me hold that. So video's in the text. Also, your phone calls are also being recorded, right? So what you're starting to see is companies like Gong.ai, Gong.io rather, chorus.ai, these different companies, Conversocial.ai, all these different companies are now capturing your visual, right? What's being recorded on video, and they're using that to do an analysis on you, the customer, right? And I'll get to that in just a bit. And then they're also capturing all the conversations. So all the voice conversations are now being caught like for example, if you're in a telecenter, all those conversations are being caught. They're converted into text, right? And then they do what they call a sentiment analysis. A sentiment analysis basically, is based on what the person said. Are they leaning my way or away from me? What's their sentiment? And then from there, they make a prediction. By the way, AI, if you want to understand AI is all about prediction. And it wants to predict whether you'll buy or not. That's kind of the whole deal, right? And so I'm looking at this going, all right, so we got text, email, social media. What else are they capturing? Phone calls. They're capturing videos. The video is interesting because on the video side, what they're able to do now is read your face. So if we're having a Zoom call, by the way, I should mention, so Microsoft just partnered, I think it was Microsoft just partnered with Zoom and somebody else. I forgot who it was. But basically now, think of Zoom, you're having a Zoom call. Not only are they grabbing the audio, right, converting it into text, analyzing it, sentiment analysis, they're also now going to grab your video and analyze the video. Like there's algorithms out there, programs, that's all an algorithm is, a program that I can actually say, find some glasses in a scene. So for example, I can load a movie in, right? And I can type in, find me glasses, like eyeglasses, find me glasses. And the actual system will run to every scene where glasses are present. If somebody's wearing them or they're on the table, it'll run to every scene so it can actually identify when glasses are in a scene. Pretty awesome stuff. But the other thing it can do is the sentiment analysis variation is that they can look at your face and they can judge your micro expressions, whether you're happy, sad. All this is becoming very analytical. They can analyze, again, all your micro expressions and determine your sentiment. So for example, if I'm having a conversation with you right now and I say something like that you disagree with, you might slightly go, maybe just tilt your head like, and the system will capture that. So, hey, at this moment, when you said that, he responded that way. Therefore, here might be an issue. So they're going to highlight stuff like that. So I think that's pretty interesting. So we got text, email, social media, you got phone calls, you got videos now being converted into text, but also being analyzed for, again, micro expressions, your sentiment. So what's happening now is that they're trying to get, so now you got to take all this right here, this whole bubble right here. So you got to take this whole thing. And the big question is, how do you bring that all in? Right? It's like, how do you bring that all in? And I think what's interesting is that if you look at this, if you really look at this, these are different companies. So for example, I use Gong.io. Gong.io is right here. That's a Gong.io, right? That's a Gong.io company, right? That's a Gong.io. Right? Over here, this could be Gong also, but maybe this is, oh, by the way, it was Gong.io Gong.io is now partnering up with Zoom. So Gong.io was actually analyzing your conversations voice-wise. Now they've partnered with Zoom and they're going to start analyzing your video and your voice as well. This could be like I don't know, I'll say a chorus.ai. By the way, I didn't mention here also, there's one more that belongs in here, and that's your chatbots. A chatbot is basically, well, you know what a chat is. So that's text as well. So that's included in this whole, all this stuff is now being jammed into that, all right? So that's kind of what's happening, right? So all this stuff is being jammed into this CRM. Remember, CRM was just like some of you too young to remember a Rolodex, but it's just a list of customers and maybe some buying history. And it started out as a system of records. By that, it's just, it's like an address book. It's just an address book, right? You got email, you got contact, person's title, their company, their website, system of records, right? But now what's happening is that they're taking all this right here. I mean, this is where it starts getting really fascinating, at least to me. I mean, I'm an engineer by training, so I could just be the nerd in this room. But it's taking all this right here, right? So we're taking all this right here, and we're jamming it into this CRM right there. And so that's where my brain was kind of going, what does this all look like as we roll this thing out into the future? What does that look like? What does that CRM look like, and how is it going to impact you if you're in sales in the long run? And so now, think about what they're trying to do. I think it's fascinating. And I think it's fascinating that they're trying to take all this content, chat, text, email, social media, phone calls, your video costs and any piece of data that you have. By the way, I didn't include over here, I can put historical data. Historical data is basically how much you've bought in the past is also in that. So what you've bought, all your buying habits online. So for example, when you look at an Amazon has all this stuff, right? It has your historical data, which is why it recommends certain things, right? Because it analyzes the historical data. So this right here, you'll hear the word, this is a huge repository of information of your history. Amazon just works here. Amazon just says, look, let's look at this historical data, look at how much they bought, when they buy, how often do they buy, average deal size, so to speak, how much you actually buy, and then make some predictions. And these are called recommendation engines. A recommendation engine is based on historic data. It recommends things based on what you've bought in the past. It's like when you go to Netflix, same thing. They're running the recommendation engine algorithm constantly because what they want to do is recommend the next movie. They want to just make sure that, again, you pick the right movie based on your history. I was talking to my friend Chris Stone of Cast Ahead, who does a lot of my production, my video production stuff and audio. And I told him that, I don't know if he's noticed, but I've noticed it, that have you noticed that Netflix, for example, changes their thumbnail for a movie? The thumbnail, the picture for the movie, they change it. And I think what's happening, I'm guessing, but what I think that's happening is that they're running different, they're doing some split testing. By the way, split testing means split A, split B. Let's test this one with this group, and let's test this thumbnail, this graphic with this group. That's split testing. And then they go, which one works better? And I think the algorithms are constantly doing that. They keep changing thumbnails to see which ones get the more clicks. Anyway, I digress, but my point being is that this right here, the historical data, is now going to be put in. That's already kind of existing, but let's go back to the ERP system. If you go back to the ERP system right here, this is where you see a lot of historical data. So it's storing a lot of stuff here, but now it's also pushing that to the what? The ERP. Now keep in mind that I'll be able to look at, if I want to buy a product through a CRM, now, if I'm connected to the ERP system right here, I can look to see if there's inventory, right? I can also see if I can get updated financing right here. So all this is interconnected. Again, it's looking like a jumbled mess, but now you understand how my brain works. So that's kind of, we're back to this. So I think it's interesting that we have historical data here that they have to capture. So this is almost looking at the past, and then this right here, by the way, one could argue this is the future, but a lot of this is stuff that you said in the past is also put in historical data. But anyway, they're mixing all this. So this, I know it's getting messy. All this is now being jammed into this CRM. Now, so all that's in there. The question then becomes for a lot of these companies is how do you manage all these databases, right? How do you manage? That's the problem companies are having right now, is how do you scale this data? And then who manages, who analyzes it? So when you look at what's happening at a macro level, companies are struggling with, one, how do I manage my infrastructure? This is why, for example, Amazon created the AWS, right, which is their web hosting services, Amazon's web hosting services, whatever it's AWS. And what it is basically when we talk about the cloud is that they're taking all this stuff and putting it up in the cloud. Why? Because if I'm a company and if I have to store all this data, right, and then back it up, by the way, I have to store all this data and then back it up, that becomes a problem. And if it's high volume data, then guess what? I mean, this really becomes a tricky problem. This is why, this is too technical, but that's why you have these systems called, like, for example, Hadoop. Hadoop is almost like a distributed database for processing information. What does that mean? Think of your hard drive. Instead of putting all your stuff on one hard drive, you're managing, all these transactions with multiple hard drives distributed just to be able to kind of process the information. I know, too much. I'll pull back. But anyway, it's a lot of data. It's a lot of data that's being moved around, so that's why AWS, that arm of Amazon, is making so much money because everybody's moving stuff to the cloud, and then they have all these analysis tools that you can run on all this data. All right, so that's interesting. So some people can actually build their own data center, leverage a data center, or just send it up to like a big old Amazon cloud and manage the data up there, and they take care of all that data. But that doesn't answer the question I'm still trying to answer is how does a CRM, so what's the future of selling? So if we kind of understand where all this information is coming from, what they're doing to compile the information, then it becomes like an interesting conversation, right? It's like, what do they do with all this information? And this is kind of what I've been trying to figure out. Like I said, I've been racking my brain, like just trying to figure out. You ever have something it's like a mind bug? It just starts to bother you because you don't understand it. You don't fully understand it, so you start writing things out. That's kind of what's happening to me. And so, all right, so we get all this, right? Historical data here. All this data is being pulled in. Great, got it. So CRM. So if you think about it, a CRM, in terms of what we think of a CRM, I guess there's a minimum zoom here. Let me just move this off here. Well, I wanted to keep that there. I might go to a new sheet. Let me go to a new sheet. And so now let's go to CRM. So this is kind of where I was at when I decided to do this live session with you guys. And again, hopefully I'm not boring you. But a way of looking at things, well, let me step back. Have you ever just try to step back and try to understand something? It's like if you don't understand, it's like you don't feel comfortable, right? And for me, I have to simplify things. When it's too complicated, I try to simplify it. And so here's one big simplification that I've concluded. A big simplification is here's how we should look at it. A CRM system manages the sales part, right? Everything that has to do with sales, it manages, right? And then an ERP system is more concerned with, I'll just say, operations of a company, of an organization, just the operations, right? I showed you the bubbles, how they tie together. So if you think about it, the goal of these two systems that are coexisting, kind of tied together, is that the goal of a CRM is to increase revenue, where the goal of the ERP is to reduce the cost, right? And that equals profit up, right? That's the goal, profitability. So that's a good way of kind of looking at what the two things are trying to do. This one's trying to imagine, really trying to figure out how do you manufacture something and make it efficient and more productive and basically get it done. And this is how do you generate more sales, and then they focus on that. Two mega systems. I mean, I think what's interesting is that these are two huge systems, right? That are you can only imagine large companies who have big manufacturing processes have to manage all this stuff. So anyway, by the way, hi, I know you got a lot of you guys are saying hi to me, Matt. I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Let me see. All this data, let me see. Theonis Stuffberg says, all this data will give insights and trends into customer behavior, needs, and preference. That is correct, man. I'll put your comment up here, man, so everybody can see it. It's a good comment. Because that's exactly it. All this data will give insights into trends, behavior, customer behavior, and needs and preferences. Trends are theories which need to be tested, to be practiced, be verified. AI can be a great asset here. Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And so we need that data. That's why I think, when we look at collecting this data right here, all this stuff, this historical data, plus this, you always hear the phrase, I like this phrase, propensity to buy, right? I like that phrase, propensity to buy. It's like, that's really what the thing is trying to do. It's trying to predict what you're going to do, whether you're going to buy or not. If I show you this, will you buy it? And so as my friend Theonis, and I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, but what he's actually saying, and we all understand, is that all this data is going to be used to figure out what your preferences are and make a prediction. Again, AI is all about prediction. What do you think you'll do if I show you this? I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we're talking about, Amazon has that one-click buy, right? One-click buy. And Amazon is trying to move to a zero-click system. Think about that for a second. 0 clicks. What does that mean? It predicts what you want and just delivers what you want before you know you want it. 0 clicks. That's pure prediction right there. And can they pull it off? I think they could. I think they'll look at their cost of sales and how many times they'll be wrong versus right. And I think the majority of the time they're going to be right. And I think they'll do it with products that are very basic. For example, things that we consume in the household. For example, laundry detergent, paper towels, toilet paper, whatever it may be, food items. Imagine the system being able to predict what you need. This is not that far off. So if Amazon can move towards a 0-click environment with their predictions, their analytics, imagine, what the future holds. So, but back to sales. I digress. So this is how I break it up. So when we're looking at ERP systems, it's all about cost and running the operations and sales. Now, again, the two are tied together. So I don't want somebody saying, well, Victor, they're really tied together. Of course they're tied together. They have to be, right? One drives the other one. You know, this is supply, this meets the demand. I get that. One supply meets the demand. And so, but it still begs the question that if we just talk about a CRM now, what does that thing look like? Like if you're in a company and you're looking at a CRM system, what does that look like? And so here's where it starts to become interesting. This is now to me, it's like it's starting to become interesting. Let's look at a sales funnel. And again, I'm just talking out loud, brainstorming here, because I'm trying to figure out how this all fits. And it's like, you know, I don't know about you, but I can't sleep sometimes because I can't fit. When we look at a funnel, a sales funnel, right? It typically has three major pieces, just three major pieces, right? And so if I look at, for example, we got people coming in the top of the funnel. This is where you'll see all your marketing automation, right? Marketing automation. So what is this? Marketing automation is anything that has to do with basically driving clients to your website, for example, right? And it's also looking at the engagement at that level. For example, at this level, it's going to track, you know, did you look at some case studies, right? Did you watch the video? Even on the watching the video, did you finish the video? That's F, finish the video. Or how many minutes did you watch, right? And did you give us your email? You know, did you download some white papers? Did you download that? Now, we all know this as scoring, right? Depending on how much you do, you know, the system is constantly scoring. By scoring, I mean it's just, you know, let me move this down here so you guys can see that. So the system is constantly just scoring, basically, saying, all right, they did this, they did this, they did this, so therefore, you know, the scores begin to go up. You know, so I think that's interesting, right? So now marketing says, hey, and at this level we have an MQL. That's a marketing qualified lead. Marketing says, you know what? I think this person, you know, based on the activity and their score, right? We think that this is a good lead. Let's pass this on to the inside salespeople, right? And so the inside salespeople, the SDRs right here, are now going to try to engage, right? So at this point, you have sales engagement platforms, right? Right. So here, what we're looking at is sales engagement, pure sales engagement. And that is they're going to reach out to the person, call the individual, try to connect with them, and maybe even just try to do a small mini demo or at least have a conversation about why they're looking at all these things right here. And then at this point, if the SDR, by the way, this SDR, you often hear BDR, the SDR stands for Sales Development Rep, and also, let me see, what did you write there? Do AI that you mentioned. Please send those companies that do AI that you mentioned. Okay, so all of a sudden, so the SDRs are going to talk to you. I'll call you. I said, hey, Theonis. I said, by the way, I noticed that you downloaded this. Can you walk me through what you were looking for, and maybe I can help guide you. And then maybe I can begin a conversation with you about what we as a company have to offer and what we can do with you. You know, you do some discovery questions, ask what they're doing, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, what they're looking for. Then you start making some comparative notes here. And maybe, depending on which company you are, you may do a sample demo just to give them an idea of what you have. And the person says, you know, I really like this. I want a full demo. At that point, you know, traditionally, you would now send it down to the salesperson, the account executive, right? And that at this time, it becomes a sales qualified lead right there. It becomes a sales qualified lead. And then the salesperson, before the pandemic, would actually go there, meet with the customer, try to set up a one-on-one, whatever it may be. You can still do it online also. So that's kind of the funnel. So that's what's happening on our side, the company side, right? I haven't forgot about the CRM conversation. This is leading up to the CRM conversation because there's several things going on here. There's three different platforms being used here. And so let me just use this eraser here. Let me clear this part out. Let me just clear this part out. Let me just clear that part out. And then, so think about, here's marketing automation right here. So they're using, and again, it depends how, they're using the sales engagement. I'll call this the sales engagement platform, also known as a SEP. That's what they're using. These guys, I said wrong, engage, it's not engagement, it's enablement. They're using sales enablement platforms. And I'll explain what I mean in just a bit. And then right here, down here is where the traditional CRM sits that salespeople use. All right, that's kind of how I see it. So 3 levels of leads coming in, right? sales engagement handles it here, and then they move it to the SDR here, which means they use their sales engagement platform, and then they move it down. And again, these things are tied together. And then the CRM is really where the salesperson is handling, pretty much the sales process, going through the process, documenting everything. Now, remember, going back to this beautiful graphic here that I gave you, all this stuff, social media interaction, all that stuff is being captured and shoved into the CRM. So when I show you this right here, it's not that it's standing by itself. This is driving, let me do that in a different color. This is driving information here, I'm sure, and this is pushing information here, I'm sure, and it's just collecting it in some giant database repository, right? That's why when we look at CRMs, and I've talked about this in past, I have this thing called Sales After Dark for some of you who attend my Sales After Dark. I talked about the death of the CRM. The death of the CRM is basically, the traditional CRM that's just a system of records, where now we look at a system of intelligence, which is pretty much what I'm describing. All this intelligence is being pushed into the CRM. And so now you have something that doesn't resemble your mom and dad's CRM that have been around since the 90s. And so, 30 years later, a lot has changed. So these things are now looking differently. And so what I'm thinking is, okay, so now, as I was trying to figure out my mapping here, I go, all right, so if I believe all this is happening, right? If I believe all this is happening, how does it all fit together, like, with an ERP system and stuff like that? That's my dilemma, man. That's kind of where I'm at. And so then I said, okay, so now if you're with me on this, this is sales engagement, sales enablement, and your typical CRM. So how does this all fit together? And then I was trying to draw this diagram of how this all fits together. And so I said to myself, let me put the CRM in the middle, right? Because I think that's going to be like, and again, I'm just looking at the sales side, not the manufacturing side, which is the ERP system. And if I look at the sales side, let's first say that I know the ERP's out here, right? It's connected somehow to that. But let's leave that over here for now. Let's just leave that there for now. So if you have a CRM, how does this all work? How does it all play? And I think it starts playing like this. We're going to have marketing tied into your CRM. That's an easy one, right? We're going to have sales also tied in, to this system right there. That's cool. I think also we need to have customer service, tied in right there. Yeah. So all these three things. So now we're able to come in through the CRM. In other words, what I'm thinking is that now we're able to come in through the CRM right here. We're able to come in right here to access information about sales, information about marketing, information about customer service. And then somewhere out here, if I ... this is all the stuff with regard to inventory and things of that nature, right? I can also tie in, and again, the future, I'm just thinking out loud, maybe I can tie in also, if you have a proposals department, right? Proposals department, or if you do it, that might be another place we can tie that in. But also, if you think about it, we also have to tie in legal again. And I know legal is tied in with the ERP, but legal has to review these contracts. So all this stuff has to be tied in. All this stuff has to be tied in to make any sense of what's going on. And so when you're looking at, what's happening with these companies, you got to go, okay, so how does this all start fitting together and what do we do? So if I'm building a CRM, I have to figure out how to manage all this information right in the middle. Now, where does AI fit into all this? Well, I think the AI, I'm going to have to use a different color. Let me use a different marker on this thing. Where I think AI fits, I'm going to give it a nice blue, light blue look. Where AI fits, I think there's a layer out here, right? There's a layer that just hovers around the CRM. That's kind of cool, actually, when you do it with the board like that. So it's a layer. All this, we'll call this the AI layer, because that's what I think it is. So right here you have, so here you have AI. That's the AI layer right there. And in here you have everything from natural language processing. Natural language processing means it can read the content, decipher the content, use different algorithms like bag of words to make sense of what the context is. Then you have natural language generators. Remember, natural language processing processes the text to say, oh, here's what I think he's thinking or she's thinking. Then the natural language generator can actually generate text. If you're ever watching a video on YouTube and the subtitles come up automatically, that's a natural language generator. But also, they're going to have different type of, and I'm just going to put a broad title here, different pattern recognition algorithms. Remember, it's what my friend said earlier, is that all this is about collecting data and finding patterns in the data and then elevating that as insight to you. So for example, if I can read the data, analyze it, the algorithm, and find the insight, then I can actually push it upward and you go, oh, this is what I should be doing. For example, I like using the examples of upselling, right? Let's say you're selling to certain customers. You got your ideal client profiles. You put them in different buckets. And then based on the data, the CRM tells you, hey, people who've bought this in this area, in this country, during this period, during this whatever, are actually willing, 90% willing to buy this other product here. Now's the time for marketing to push out a promotional piece. So what will happen is the CRM will bubble up a pattern, a piece of insight, information beyond the obvious, and then say, hey, people who bought this also bought that. It will trigger marketing into creating a campaign to say, hey, push this out to this particular market segment. And you can do it with pricing, things of that nature. And then pricing is another thing, right? Because, even within right here, proposals, even within proposals itself, there's so many things you can do with dynamic pricing. So for example, Salesforce has this within their Einstein system where, and I talked about it in my book, the Sales Ex Machina book. By the way, if you're not familiar with the book, here it is. So the Sales Ex Machina book is, I wrote this with my co-author, Dr. James Anderson. It's all about AI. But in here we have examples of, by the way, it's on Amazon. Here we have examples of, the propensity to buy. But when you look at the proposal piece, in Salesforce, there's actually algorithms that will tell you that if you adjust the price upward or downward by a certain percentage, it can actually give you a probability of win or loss. Isn't that interesting? Fascinating stuff. Why? Because based on the historical data of past deals, the AI, because again, somewhere down here, and again, I'll just put HD, and that's always historical data, right? It's pulling historical data. It's analyzing conversations that are being held up here with sales and marketing. You're on the website, the marketing automation. You're talking to the SDR. Remember, once you start talking to the SDR, which is the second level, those engagement calls are going to be recorded. And so all this becomes information that, again, is put in this like a giant pot that you mix in with data, right? And then they got these brilliant people, more brilliant than me, who can actually create algorithms to kind of find these pieces of insight. Find these little data points, these little correlational, constellational pieces that help you say, hey, this is kind of what I need to do. And so this is all in the mix. But on the proposal side, I think the Einstein thing is pretty interesting because it can tell you by lowering the price or raising the price rather, or lowering it, that you have a chance, the probability of winning or losing goes up or down. By the way, another cool feature is that salespeople hate this, but I think managers love this, is that if you decide to give a bigger discount for that product, it says, okay, you decided to give them a 20% discount instead of 15. This one needs VP approval. Real cool things like that. So the system is grabbing all these interactions that's happening in marketing, everything that's going on in sales, all the proposals, all the legal contracts. This is data. And then again, what's happening in customer service, who's happy, who's not happy, is being jammed into the CRM. And then this is what's beginning to happen. You're starting to get this intelligent. I think they should call this the ICRM. I'm going to put an I there. The intelligent CRM. Somebody should come up with a phrase like that. ICRM, because that's what we're dealing with now. It's an intelligent CRM system. And so what does this mean to you and me? Well, I think it's what's happening right now, and based on different studies, whether you read Gartner, Forrester, or some of these companies out there, I think it's really interesting how they talk about more people are going online to actually buy. And B2C is obvious, right? And there'll always be a market that you still have to do face-to-face. So let's use the 80-20 rule here, that there's always going to be 20% of the market where it still has to be done face-to-face because of level of complexity and it has to be personalized or customized. So there's always going to be that market of high customization, high personalization, high complexity, right? So that's 20% of the market that will always be needing salespeople, right? That's that. But what's happening is today, maybe 30% of everything that we're doing is now being bought online. And that number is moving towards the 80 mark, right? And more are going online. Even in B2B sales, most people think that B2B salespeople are insulated from these changes, but they're not. They're not. Depending on the product or service you're offering, again, they can go online and get it themselves. I mentioned that I work with, let's say, one of my customers are pool companies. Pool companies can now do a visual demo. I forgot, what's the company's name? I did a co-webinar with him. I was talking about the AI side, and he was talking about the sales demo side. And he had the gentleman who developed the program. His first name is Noah, and I forgot the program is called. It's something Studios. But it's almost like, if you ever played like, I don't know, Fortnite or Final Fantasy or one of those great games, is that now they can design the pool, take a satellite shot, right? Take a picture of your backyard, basically. They can pull that into their actual system. They can design a pool based on your specifications. It just requires us talking, via video. And then I can show you several designs. And in real time, you can put furniture and move furniture around, move the pool around, change the design in real time. You can even put a little fire pit right next to the pool, take it out. And then what's even more fascinating, if you want to see what your pool looks like at a specific time during the day, you can do that also. For example, where's the sun going to be in the morning, during the summer? It's going to show you the angle. So you might want to move your tables or your pool in that direction to actually maximize the heat so you don't have to heat the pool as much. I mean, just crazy stuff like this. Or what's it going to look like in the evening at sunset? Oh, here's where you might want to put the fire pit. All this stuff is happening. So that's another perfect example of I don't need your typical B2B salesperson to go out there. I need, or in this case, is business to residential, right? You're a pool owner selling to a residence. So that's kind of B2C. But the point is, I don't need to be there to actually walk you through it. I can just show you the design. So anyway, technology is making it so that we don't have to be there. So what's happening is, I think it was Forrester that put out a study that says about, it's like 78% of B2B buyers are now going online almost through the full customer journey, finding all the information before they reach out and contact somebody. So again, and I think this is going to it's either better or worse depending on how you look at it. It's worse if you're a salesperson. It's better if you're a customer because now I can do more of the research online. That's the human tendency, is that you want to do research online. But I get away from this in a sense, because what this is saying is that now customers want to come online to find something. They don't want to deal with salespeople as much. This is why I think the template we have of a salesperson, the template, the model, the stereotype, the archetype we have of a salesperson, I think that's going away. I think it's pretty much dead, actually. That's just me. So when we talk about all these like, hey, let's use this closing technique or that closing technique, I think that's past. I mean, you're still seeing what I call hints of the past. People still using it, and certain markets will still be able to use it. Again, use the 80-20. 20% of the market will still require salespeople to sell. I get that. But the majority of people are going online. They want to do the customer journey by themselves. And I think that's fascinating. Fabio Vargas says, Victor, I'm in defense software sales. Our customers still require a lot of face-to-face and hand-holding due to the long sales cycle, security/privacy protocols technology. It's not as easily adopted. Agree with you 100%, Fabio. Not even going to argue with you. I used to work for Honeywell. So, man, I understand you. I worked on the military side, and it's complicated when there's a specification for how to write a specification. So I am totally agreeing with you. That's why I put that 20% over here. Because when you're looking at that type of software, you're looking at those levels of security, you are absolutely right. You cannot do that through the buyer's journey. That's why I say when it comes to complexity, personalization, and customization, you are absolutely correct. I'm going to give you that 20% of the market, right? You're absolutely right, especially if you're in government. Definitely, man, without a doubt. That face-to-face will still be needed. But if I go back to the commercial market, not military, just the commercial market, that's kind of where I'm hinting at. And even within that market, you'll still have your 20% that will need that customization, personalization, and complexity, right? Got it. But more and more, that number started to move, and we're pushing the boundaries. of, when do I need a salesperson, when don't I need a salesperson? That's all I'm really saying. So I'm not saying it's this or that. I think that's the biggest trap we fall into when we have discussions, is that we always say, well, is it this or is it that? Well, the answer is it's both. And that's a perfect example, right? So this is kind of what the market is looking like. And so all this is data being collected. And this is what I think, this is what was keeping me up, because I was going, well, how does this all fit? And then here we're going to have, and I think I'll draw this here. I don't know if here's where we have, again, the different platforms, right? Here's where we're going to have the SEP. This is the engagement platform, right? For sales, again, you got two parts of sales. You got the sales enablement platform, which is more for like the SDRs, the inside salespeople. Then you got the CRMs. And again, I'm not separating. They're tied together because all the data is rolling in there. And then somewhere in here, again, here's proposals, right? And we're pulling information into that system as well. Legal is going to review the contracts and pull that information in. I just saw something, I think it's DocuSign. I'm almost sure it's DocuSign. We're all familiar with DocuSign, right? So let me see. Vinay Benot says, complex products and solutions will have dependency on good salesperson. Absolutely, my friend. So those salespeople will never go away. Those who deal with high complex sales, yeah, definitely, you'll never go away, because the customers need your help. The customer can only do, let's say, 80, 90% of the buyer journey, kind of, but it takes the good salesperson. These are the people that are going to still be around. So let me just pause here, because I want to talk about who's going to survive this nuclear sales winter that's driven by AI. And it is what my friend Fabio and Vinay are pointing out, that if those people who understand the customer's business, it's a complex sale, they need to help the customer, guide them to how to do it. These are the people who are going to survive. And if you're a salesperson, you're watching this and you want to survive in this new economy for the next 5, 10 years, whatever it may be, know your customer's business, know your products, but be able to basically consult. We get back to consultative selling. Back in 1970, Mac Hannon wrote a book called Consultative Selling. And if you think about it, the guy was way ahead of his time. What he's saying is you got to sit on the same side as your customer and be able to talk to them as like you understand their business. You really have to understand what they're going through. And again, we can draw a curve that the more complex the sales gets, the more you'll need a salesperson to actually have those dialogues and those conversations. And again, when you talk about system complexities and things of that nature, especially in the technology side, you guys are absolutely right, man. Salespeople should focus on, Theo says, salespeople should focus on customer behavior and human psychology. I think there's a layer of that, right? In my podcast, when I talk about the Sales Influence podcast, that's what I'm talking about. It says finding the why and how people buy. How do they make buying decisions? So whether it's a simple sale or complex sale, you're absolutely right. Understanding what motivates the buyer to buy or not want to buy, and then be able to overcome that resistance, is what true selling is all about. So this is kind of what I was thinking about. Like I said, I was just trying to fit all this into how it works with an ERP system. And I was just having this brainstorm of idea, and I had all these, like I said, I had all these things running in my head. I just said, how does this all work? And to manage this type of data, I think it's going to be, rather incredible. And again, I think the AI piece, let me go back to this one, because I think, to me, and I know it's a mess, by the way, so sorry about that. That's what brainstorming is, isn't it? It's just a mess. But when you look at, and I'll highlight it here again. Now, let's do a clean sheet of paper. Let's do it together. And by the way, I'm just being casual today, so I thought I'd just kind of come up here and just kind of start drawing. But when you look at, let's do it again. When you look at, I'm going to monitor all your chats, right? That's the AI system talking, right? Then it's going to look at your texts, right? You're texting on your mobile, right? You look at email. We're going to capture that too. We got the chat bot. What am I missing? Email. By the way, I'm going to take your video and I'm going to convert that into text. I'm also going to take your phone calls and I'm going to convert that into text. And so it's capturing all this. And I think across all this, I think right here, I can put probably everything you put on social media, like all your posts. I mean, they're going to find all that stuff, right? So they can put all. So all this is, this is the stuff that's being captured on you right now. And by the way, if you don't think this is being monitored, I think you might be a little delusional. So all this stuff is being captured. And so all this stuff is now being jammed into, so again, we'll call it let's just call it some database. I don't know what to call it. Just some nice little database right here, right? And somewhere out here, what we should mention, somewhere out here, and I think this is what a lot of people don't talk about, are all these other databases of companies you deal with. So for example, Amazon has information on you, right? Amazon has, so maybe your favorite store, like my wife's, is Bed, Bath, and Beyond, right? Well, that's data, right? Maybe you subscribe to, I don't know, some type of magazine like the Wall Street Journal, right? And you're always on the chat. That's data. These are databases. Well, what's happening is that they're also what? Buying some of these data sources. So when they talk about that data is the new oil, this is what they're talking about, because the more data I have to analyze, by the way, this being all this stuff is going to be pushed through a what? Some AI algorithm, right? To analyze. It's becoming a mess again. To analyze. So all this data, so when we talk about data is the new oil, what we're talking about is this is the data, and they're buying data to try to understand you better, to try to understand who you are and get your persona down. And even in the EU, they talk about anonymized data. But again, yeah, somebody said, Mike Janice said, don't forget customer review data. So then out here, we could have Yelp, right? Customer review data. I can buy that too. You're absolutely right. The amount of data you can buy is infinite. Vinay said, consultative selling is the key. I agree with you, Vinay. I think we're on the same page. LinkedIn user says, I've always suspected a huge number of sales positions can be replaced with a great online experience in AI. How can sales professionals remain relevant if they are in that 80% bucket? You better find a way to move over to that 20% because it's coming. I mean, it's coming. It's because it's natural. We all want to reduce. Think about how you buy. Think about how you buy. And then say, do you really want to deal with a salesperson? The answer is no. I would like to kind of go down that journey of discovery by myself. And then when I finally need some clarification, I always say you need three things when you contact a salesperson. Clarification, confirmation, or confidence. That's three, right? Clarification. I'm not sure. Is this right? Now I need clarification from you, right? And again, the confidence piece is I want to talk to you and make sure that, based on what you're telling me, that it's a good decision. And confirmation is, by the way, I read this, I saw this, can it do that? That's confirmation. So clarification, confirmation, and confidence are the three things people look for when they reach out to the salesperson. So if you're in the 80%, you're on a clock. I'm sorry, but you're on a clock. But the more you move up the intellectual food chain, if I can say it that way, the more you move up the complexity intellectual food chain, the more valuable you become to a company. But also keep in mind, and this is my warning, this is my clarion call, the harbinger for my baby boomers. If you do not up your game, in the past, CRMs was what you needed to know and fill in, right? But I think we're moving to a point where these other platforms, the engagement platforms and the enablement platforms, are also going to become part of the sales tool set that salespeople have to know. Gen Xers, millennials will have no problem with this. Baby boomers, I think they're struggling. I think they're struggling to move up that technological food chain to insulate themselves from, not being successful or being relevant, I should say. I think that's a better word, right? Being relevant. And so anyway, so all these different databases is what they're looking for. And I think it's really interesting. This almost has, I always like to compare this to the oil industry. In the oil industry, it's very simple, right? And I think there's upstream, right? There's upstream. There's that point where they collect, and then there's downstream, right? Downstream, right? And this is where they actually mine, but upstream means up here. For example, this is where you actually mine for the actual oil, right? That's upstream. That's where you're drilling, right? This is where the drilling is happening, right? Right? And then here is where you're processing it, right? And then here, downstream, is where you're creating the final products. The plastic bowl, right? You got upstream, midstream, downstream. That's kind of how it works. Upstream, get the oil. Midstream, process it. Make it ready for the market. And then this is almost like the raw product that actually companies can use. And then you sell it downstream to people who actually make plastic products. So this is no different than oil. I mean, for data, if you think about it, there's the upstream. What's the upstream? The upstream is all this historical data over here. This is the upstream part right here, right? This is the upstream. I'm talking all this here is upstream. Historical data, all this is upstream. Now, the AI has to process it. So the AI has to do some processing, right? And kind of, by the way, let me just highlight this. By processing, I mean it has to structure the data. If it's unstructured data like video, you got to structure it to make sense of it. You got to prepare the data, okay? Much like oil, you got to prepare the oil. You got to refine it. The first level of AI is refining the data, right? Putting it in a way that it makes sense. Now, I push it downstream, and people start using that data to pull out insights. That's where these quants come in. Quants are people who are these scientists who just look at data and start to make sense of it by running different algorithms to see if they can pull out the insight to be able to use that insight to sell you more products or service. So that's kind of how it works. It's good. Is that too much? Anyway. But anyway, you get the idea. That's kind of the mess we're dealing with right now. And I got up this morning, sipping a cup of coffee downstairs. I go, I got to get this out of my brain. You ever have that moment where you got to get all this stuff out of your brain so it makes sense? And so, I don't know. What do you guys think of that? Because I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to go get some coffee again right now. MD says, good evening, man. Good evening to you guys. Here, I'll move on. Let me see if I can find some good comments. Maybe you guys, if you know more than me, let me know, man, because I'm just trying to figure this out, just like you guys. Factor Big Five personality traits is what many are using in their algorithm to predict human behavior. Remember Cambridge Analytica 4 years ago? I do remember that, right? That was a big deal. Food for thought. Carlos Alfonso Gonzalez, great point, because it is, by the way, it was a great documentary, by the way. I thought it was a fantastic documentary. If you don't know what we're talking about, look up Cambridge Analytica and what's behind that story. But the documentary, I think, is also on Netflix, so great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Mosharif Hossein says, good evening. Well, good morning over here, man. Thank you for joining. I'm actually positioning myself on leveraging AI technology while working in the hospital because I would only like to speak with highly qualified prospects on my day off. All right, that's cool too. Let me see. Where in the value chain, upstream, midstream, or downstream, does the most value lie? Where I think in the upstream. You know, where the source of the data, I would think. Because then everything, again, if you got bad oil up there, you're refining, you're drilling for the wrong stuff. And the point you bring up is very good because, okay, where do I find the right oil to mine, right? In other words, on the upstream part, what a great question, man. That's a great question. Let me just take this off for a second. But that is a great question. Where does the greatest value lie? Let me see if I can just remove this here for a second because does it lie here, as they say? Because I think, again, if it's right here on the upstream, that's where, because again, it doesn't matter what, AI is just processing, right? It's just an algorithm we're processing stuff through, right, to clean it up. But you can't clean up dirt, for example. So I would say it's right here. And that's the science, right? How do you, Theonis, how do you, find the right data sets? Because what we're looking at down here is this is 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way dot, all the way to n, right? So there's so many data sources. Like what combination of these data sources should you use? How many should I use? What combination should I use? And when I go in the data, what field should I use? What parameters or variables? What should I hold constant? What should I not hold constant? That's where it gets weird. But again, what's making AI possible today is the processing power that we currently have, right? So with all these new, you look at TensorFlow and some of these processing algorithms, and you look at deep learning, neural networks. This is why all this now becomes possible and beyond the actual human, right? Because we have so many databases we can choose from on the upstream, but what combination thereof? So, at any given moment, some of these algorithms are, analyzing, I don't know, like 100,000 data points at one time. I mean, I'm still having a hard time figuring out 3 dimensions, right? The right-hand rule. I'm still working on that 3-dimensional thing. And so these things are looking at constellations of data in different Z spaces. And you're like, they're able to figure this stuff out. So anyway, that's like going down the rabbit hole on that one, man. So Mike Janice says, social proof is still relative whether on social media or something. Social proof is always going to be around, right? People always look to what other people are doing. So I agree with that 100%. So anyway, I think I'm going to jump off. I just wanted to kind of brainstorm with you guys. Let me know what you think of this. Should I brainstorm more? Like I said, I really didn't prepare. I just said, here are my notes. And I said, let me just jump on the board and see where this goes. But I love some of your questions because I think it's an interesting thing that's coming our way. Well, it's not coming our way. It's here. And some of us are trying to understand it. And so when you look at the complexity behind the infrastructure for this, I think that's fascinating. What's his name? The guy that founded Wired Magazine. He said something insightful. The guy from Wired Magazine, I think his name is, it's Kevin. If I get the name wrong, I'm sorry. If you know the name, let me know. It's the guy who did Wired Magazine, right? That's the magazine called Wired Magazine. He said the way to understand AI is to, this blew my mind, he says to view it as a utility, right? Much like you would view electricity. And I thought, that is a mind blower. Because what he is saying is that you take any inanimate object and you infuse it with electricity, like you take, like a lamp. That's basically, light with electricity running through it. And it says you take all these things and you add AI to it, it's the same thing. You're electrifying objects. That's electricity. It electrifies object. When you take an object and you run AI through it, you AI it. So for example, we're now seeing refrigerators that have AI in it. You now see cars, right? The autonomous vehicles, they have AI, right? So if you start thinking about AI like electricity, it's going to be everywhere. You're not going to notice it. Your phone has AI. Alexa, AI. AI is already all around us. And what Kevin Kelly said was that it's going to be everywhere and you're going to be able to utilize it, but you're not going to know it's there. But somewhere in the background is all this, man. It's all that is going on in the background. And I think it's good for us to understand that and think about it. So anyway, last comments here before I sign off. Victor, great brainstorming. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Like I said, it's not planned out. So, this is, let me see. I got some social proof. This one right here, AI will become very critical in service sales. 100% agree, Alex. 100% agree with you on that. Carlos says, Victor, great brainstorming. Got to go to jump into a client call. Looking forward to watch the full piece and comments when you upload it later. You're really into something here. Cheers. Cheers right back. No, man, thank you for your great questions. I love it. Fabio says, what? These are helpful insight, and honestly, it gets us spinning our wheels in our respective roles and companies. I think so, man. Last one by Brian, my man. I haven't seen you for a while. Hey, Victor, finally able to catch your stream. Hope you're healthy. Well, I am. And on that note, man, thank you guys for joining me on this wild brainstorming. Listen, leave a comment down there if you like it or not. What would you do differently? And then maybe, once in a while, I'll just jump on and just grab a topic and just start talking about it. On that note, I'm out of here, guys. Have a great weekend.